Michael Chandler versus Arman Tsarukyan is being in the works for UFC 314. Now, it's still a rumor, but let's be honest, it makes no sense, and I believe it. Because, let's call it what it is, Chandler has Dana White privileges, and it's not even up for debate anymore. The fact that this dude is about to get his 5th title eliminator, that's just insane. Think about it. He walked into the UFC, his first fight was against Dan Hooker, starched him in the first round, boom, gets a title shot. Loses to Oliveira, then he gets booked with Gaethje, and let's be real, if he would have beat Gaethje, he would have got a title shot. So what happens next? He gets Tony Ferguson, a guy who's already on a massive losing streak, knocks him out, and somehow he gets him another title eliminator against Dustin Poirier. And guess what? Chandler loses that too. Then instead of staying active, he sits out for 2 years waiting for Conor McGregor, which he never came back by the way. And then he ended up fighting Oliveira again. And guess what? Chandler lost that one too. Alright, so here we are again, another title eliminator, and this time it's against the #1 contender, Arman Tsarukyan. And at this point, man, you gotta ask yourself, how many chances does Michael Chandler get? Like seriously, there are guys in the division who have to go through absolute wars just to get a single shot. Meanwhile, Chandler, dude's out here getting handed 5. It's crazy. And honestly, if he loses to Arman, I wouldn't even be surprised if he still somehow ends up in a title fight. I mean, at this rate, I feel like it's banked into his contract, $260K to show, $260K to lose, because that man stays in the mix no matter what. But jokes aside, let's talk about Arman for a second. It's pretty clear that he's in the UFC doghouse right now. We already know Dana White wasn't too keen on giving him a title shot after he pulled out of the pay-per-view. And I thought at the very least he'd get a rematch with Charles Oliveira. But nope, here we are. And this fight, it's a huge risk for Arman because say what you want about Chandler, yeah, he loses to all the top guys, but he comes damn close. He almost finished Charles twice, almost took out Poirier. The guy has that kind of power that can change the entire fight in one moment. So for Arman, this is one of those fights where he's got to be sharp because Chandler is always dangerous. Alright, so let's talk about this fight. Arman Tsarukyan versus Michael Chandler. And look, I get it, Chandler is always dangerous, he's explosive, he's got that knockout power, and he can wrestle. But if we're gonna be real, this is a tough fight for him. Here's the thing about Chandler. He fights at 100 miles per hour right from the start, but that style has some serious downside. He burns a ton of energy early, and we've seen it over and over again. If he doesn't get the finish in the first round or two, he starts slowing down. And with Arman, that's a problem because Arman doesn't fade. His gas tank is pretty solid, and he knows how to push a pace without exhausting himself. If this fight goes into the later rounds, you have to imagine it's going to start looking bad for Chandler. And then there's the grappling. Chandler comes from a strong wrestling background, but let's be honest, he doesn't really use it in that way to win fights. He'll throw in a takedown here and there, but it's usually to create chaos, not to control his opponent. He's not a guy who's going to hold you down and smother you down like an Islam Makhachev or even an Arman Tsarukyan. And that's where Arman has a huge advantage. If he can get Chandler down, he can keep him there, force him to scramble, and just make him work. That's the worst case scenario for Chandler because again, that gas tank is an issue. Then you look at the striking. Chandler is dangerous, no question about it. He's got some serious power and he can put anyone's lights out, but he fights recklessly. He swings wild, he overextends, and when he does that, he leaves himself wide open. And Arman isn't a crazy knockout artist, but his striking is way more composed. He doesn't make a lot of unnecessary mistakes, and if Chandler comes in swinging, Arman is going to find openings. And we have to talk about durability. Chandler has been in some absolute wars. I mean, that fight with Gaethje alone took some years off his career. The one with Poirier, same thing. The war with Oliveira, dude has taken some serious damage. And at some point, that chin isn't going to hold up the same way. Yeah, he's tough, but toughness can only get you so far. Arman might not have one-punch knockout power, but if he keeps tagging Chandler over and over again, that durability is going to start to crack. Another thing that people don't talk about enough is Arman's clinch and kicking game. Chandler is in his best when he's throwing those explosive punches, but what happens when Arman starts using his kicks to keep him enraged? What happens when he ties Chandler up in the clinch and starts landing knees, making him uncomfortable? That's when the fight really starts shifting in Arman's favor. So how do I see this fight playing out? Well, if Chandler lands something big early, of course he can win. He always got that chance to survive. But if Arman survives the early storm, he's going to start taking over. I think round 3 or 4, Chandler's going to be visibly slower, and Arman will just be starting. Whether it's a dominant decision, a TKO, or even a submission, I think Arman is the one pulling away as this fight goes on. Now, Chandler's got that name value, and the UFC loves him, so I wouldn't be shocked if they still found a way to keep him relevant after this. but stylistically, this is a tough fight for him. Arman has the cardio, the grappling, the control, and the fight IQ to make this a nightmare matchup for Chandler if he doesn't land something big early. Alright, so let's not completely count Michael Chandler out here. Yeah, Arman Tsarukyan has the tools to win, better cardio, better control, and much more better disciplined approach. But let's be real, Chandler is still one of the most dangerous guys in the division when it comes to explosive finish. If he wins, it's because he does what he does best, and that's turn the fight into absolute chaos and land something big before Arman has a chance to settle in. Chandler is the definition of a wild card. He doesn't stick to a calculated game plan. He thrives in those messy, unpredictable exchanges where his explosiveness and raw power takes over. The guy isn't just fast, he's stupid fast. He closes the distance in a blink. And when he lets his hands go, it's not just one punch, it's a full-on blitz. If Arman isn't ready for that, he can get caught cold early, and that's all it takes. I mean, look at Chandler's past fights. Even when he lost, he was so close to winning in dramatic fashion. He dropped Charles Oliveira twice and nearly finished him. He had Dustin Poirier in some serious trouble at some points. Even in the war with Gaethje, he landed those shots that would have knocked out most guys. The dude just has the equalizer, one clean shot, and suddenly the entire fight flips. And let's not pretend Arman hasn't been rocked before. He's a great fighter, but he's not invincible. In that fight with Joaquin Silva, he got cracked hard and was in serious trouble for a second. Now, credit for him to recover. He recovered fast, but that showed that he can be hurt. And that's the thing. Silva doesn't nearly have that kind of explosiveness or power that Chandler brings to the table. If Silva can land something like that, what happens when Chandler connects clean? Another thing to think about, Chandler is unpredictable. Yeah, his striking gets wild, but every now and then he'll mix in a takedown, and that's what makes him dangerous. If he can at least make Arman think about the threat of the takedown, that's when his power shot becomes even more dangerous. It's not even about his wrestling control, it's about hesitation. If Arman hesitates for even a split second, Chandler can capitalize. The real question is whether Chandler can fight smart and not completely empty the tank in the first round. If he picks his moments instead of going just full berserk mode, his chances go way up. But let's be honest, when has Chandler ever fought like that? At the end of the day, Arman should win this fight. He has more tools, better fundamentals, and he's in his prime. But it's hard to ever count out Chandler out completely because he fights like a guy who doesn't care if he gets knocked out. And sometimes that's the most dangerous kind of opponent. If he lands one of those signature bombs, all the analysis, all the predictions, none of it will matter at the end. So yeah, Arman should win, but if Chandler does pull this off, it's going to be because he does what he does best, throwing cautions to the win and landing something that no one sees coming. Regardless, I don't really mind to see this fight too much. I forgot to mention that. Mainly because it's fun, dude. The idea of these two guys just sounds fun. And maybe if it was someone like, a heavy grappler who likes to grind his opponent down, I would be upset. But since it's freaking Michael Chandler, we're probably going to see a guaranteed badass fight, So how can I really hate on that?